You reach a certain point in life when you just stop explaining yourself. Not because you've run out of words. No, you've got plenty to say, but because you realize not everyone deserves to hear your truth. In your younger years, maybe you felt the need to defend yourself, to fix misunderstandings, to respond to every false rumor or biting comment. But now you've learned that silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's protection. And in many cases, it's exactly what lets karma walk in and finish the job for you. See, in our youth, we're often told to speak up. Stand your ground. Don't let anyone walk all over you. And yes, there's a time and place for that. But in your later years, when you've lived, when you've loved, when you've been hurt and healed and seen life from every angle, you begin to understand that the strongest response is sometimes no response at all. Take lies, for example. Being lied about can cut deep. Whether it's a coworker, a neighbor, or even someone in your own family twisting the truth, the urge to speak out, to clarify, to correct the story is strong. You want to set the record straight. You want people to know you're not the person they're making you out to be. But here's the thing. The more you chase down every rumor, the more you try to explain, the more suspicious you end up looking. Because those who lie aren't looking for the truth, they're looking for your reaction. That's their fuel. And that's where silence becomes your shield. It's what protects your energy from being drained by people who don't deserve it. I remember a man named Gerald, 72 years old, spent his life working in community outreach, always known for his integrity. But when his brother accused him of mishandling some family property during their parents' estate planning, things got ugly fast. People started whispering. Old cousins stopped returning his calls. He felt betrayed, heartbroken. But instead of arguing, instead of calling everyone to defend himself, Gerald stayed quiet. He focused on his daily routine. He kept showing up, calm, consistent, the way he always had. Months later, the brother's own mishandling of money came to light. And just like that, the storm passed. Gerald never raised his voice, but he walked away with his name and dignity intact. That's the thing about karma. It doesn't rush. It doesn't need a megaphone. It just waits. And when you stop chasing justice with words, justice has a funny way of finding you. Now, let's talk about betrayal. It's one of those pains that doesn't just bruise, it breaks. And the worst part? It usually comes from the people closest to us. People we trusted. People we shared our homes, our time, our hearts with. And when they turn around and betray the trust, the instinct is to confront, to ask why, to scream, how could you? But here's the uncomfortable truth. People who betray you have already told themselves a story that makes it okay. They've convinced themselves they were right, or at least justified. And the more you beg for an explanation, the more you give them exactly what they want, your pain, your reaction, your attention. There was a woman I knew. Her name was Margaret. She was 68 when she found out her lifelong friend, someone she had known since high school, had been spreading lies about her to others in their retirement community. Jealousy, maybe, or just years of buried resentment. At first, Margaret was furious. She wanted to confront her, to show her the hurt she'd caused. But instead, she did something different. She said nothing. No long emails, no angry calls. Just a quiet, clean break. She stopped showing up to the weekly dinners. She stopped taking calls. She just vanished from that friendship. And you know what happened? That silence was louder than any argument. That friend, expecting drama, got none. And over time, the rest of the community saw through the lies on their own. Because silence, when used with grace, carries power. It forces people to face their own actions without your help. In your later years, you have to be choosy with your energy. Not everything deserves your time. Not everyone deserves your words. Betrayal hurts, but silence heals. Let's move to another situation, disrespect. Maybe it comes as a backhanded comment at a family gathering. Maybe it's a dismissive tone from someone younger who assumes you've got nothing left to contribute. And maybe, just maybe, it's something cruel, said by someone who knows exactly how to push your buttons. There's a temptation to snap back, to defend your intelligence, your experience, your life. But let me tell you this, Every time you rise to someone's level just to prove a point, you leave your own level behind. I'll never forget Alfred, 74, and as sharp as they come. He'd spent decades working as a mechanic, running his own small business, helping neighbors with everything from car repairs to broken fences. One afternoon at a neighborhood gathering, a much younger man made a snide remark in front of everyone. Something about how old folks shouldn't get involved in community decisions if they're not going to be around much longer. Cruel, mean-spirited, everyone turned to Alfred, expecting a reaction. But Alfred didn't flinch. He looked the man in the eye, gave a small smile, and simply turned back to his lemonade. That silence, it shifted the whole room. People felt the weight of it. And that young man? He didn't say another word the rest of the night. You see, when you don't react, you don't just protect your dignity, you expose theirs. Silence is not the absence of thought. It's the presence of control. When you've lived as long as you have, you know that some things, some people, just aren't worth the words it takes to explain them. And here's something you probably already know deep in your bones. Silence isn't passive. It's not avoidance. It's an active choice. A decision to rise above, to stay grounded in who you are, and to let time and karma do what they do best. Because, at the end of the day, you've already proven yourself. You don't need to beg to be seen. You've lived a life. You've made sacrifices, raised families, buried friends, built homes, and rebuilt your heart more times than you can count. You've got nothing to prove to anyone anymore, especially not to people who have already decided not to see your worth. Next, we'll talk about the people who twist your words, play the victim, and turn everything into a performance, and why the quietest thing you can do might just be the most powerful thing you've ever done. There's a special kind of frustration that comes when someone flips the script and paints themselves as the victim, especially when you know the truth. They twist your words, omit the facts, cry in front of the right people, and suddenly, you're the villain. You didn't do anything wrong, but now you're the one on trial in the court of public opinion. And the harder you try to explain, the more it looks like you're just trying to cover something up. People who play the victim are not looking for a resolution. They're looking for control. The story is never about what actually happened. It's about what makes them look good, what wins them sympathy, what shifts blame. And if you walk into that performance, if you respond emotionally, if you try to defend yourself point by point, you're just giving them a stage and an audience. You're validating their version. That's why silence works. Let me tell you about Ruth. She's 71 now. She spent most of her life working as a nurse, raising 3 kids, and being the kind of friend you could count on at 2 a.m. But in her last few years at work before retirement, she had a younger coworker named Kelly who constantly stirred up trouble. Every time Ruth corrected a mistake or tried to give advice, Kelly would twist it into something ugly. She'd cry to the supervisor. She'd say Ruth was trying to make her look bad, and people started to believe it. At first, Ruth tried to fix it. She brought documentation. She had meetings. She stayed calm. She tried to be clear. But nothing changed. In fact, it made things worse. Because while Ruth was laying out facts, Kelly was playing emotions. And emotions win when the crowd wants a show. So Ruth did something different. She stopped explaining. She stopped defending. She came to work, did her job with the same grace and quiet strength she always had, and let the drama burn itself out. And you know what happened? After a few months, people began to notice a pattern. They saw that Kelly always had a sob story, always needed to blame someone, always had a new enemy. Eventually, her mask slipped. And Ruth? She never had to say, "I told you so." Her silence told the truth better than any words could. That's the power of wisdom in your later years. You realize that not every story needs a rebuttal. Sometimes, you just let people talk, and let time reveal the truth. And speaking of time, it has a way of showing who really values you. There comes a point, especially as you get older, when you start to notice something. You're the one who always calls. You're the one who remembers birthdays, checks in, makes the effort. But when you stop, silence. Days turn into weeks. And you begin to wonder, were they really that close to you? Or were you just convenient? It's not dramatic. It's not some big betrayal. It's just the slow, painful realization that your value has faded in their eyes. You become background noise. Familiar, easy to ignore. But here's the truth. People don't value what they think they'll always have. They value what they're afraid to lose. That's why stepping back quietly, without warning or resentment, can be one of the most powerful things you ever do. It's not punishment. It's clarity. There was a man named Charles, 70 years old. He was the glue in his family. The one who organized get-togethers, remembered the little things, made everyone feel connected. But over time, he noticed something. If he didn't call, the phone didn't ring. If he didn't visit, no one showed up. It hit him hard. He felt invisible in a family he had once held together. So he made a choice. No grand exit. No guilt trip. He just stopped. And at first, no one noticed. But after a few weeks, things started to change. His granddaughter called, wondering if he was okay. His son texted, saying he missed hearing from him. Slowly, one by one, they came back, not because he begged, but because his absence made them realize what his presence had always meant. That's the gift of silence. It teaches without words. It shows people what they've taken for granted, not by pointing it out, but by simply walking away and letting them feel the emptiness for themselves. And sometimes, that's the only way they'll understand. Now here's another hard truth. Some people push your buttons not because they dislike you, but because they love the reaction. They poke. They prod. They say just enough to sting, just enough to stir you up. And once they see your frustration rise, they smile inside. Because now they've got you. They're pulling your strings, and you're dancing. These people aren't brave. They're not interested in real conversation. They're addicted to control. And your reaction is their reward. But when you don't react, when you stay calm, grounded, unmoved, that throws them off. That takes their power away. There's a woman named Edna, 76, who lives in a small retirement community. Every Friday, a group gathers for coffee in the common room. And every Friday, one woman, let's call her Trish, makes a passive-aggressive comment toward Edna. "Oh, you're wearing red again? Bold choice, or that story sounds a little off, but maybe that's just your memory, huh?" At first, Edna would laugh it off, try to smile, try to stay polite. But it wore on her, until one day, she stopped. No more laughing. No sarcastic comebacks. Just silence. When Trish made a remark, Edna looked her in the eye, didn't blink, didn't smile, and simply moved on. And week by week, the remarks got softer, and then stopped. Because when you refuse to play, the game ends. As you get older, you don't have time for games. You don't have energy for drama. And you certainly don't owe anyone a reaction. You've learned to hold your frame, and when you do, the noise falls away. That's what silence gives you. Space, power, dignity. And the best part? It doesn't just protect you in the moment. It teaches others how to treat you in the future. Next, we'll look at what happens when people finally realize what they lost and come back with regrets. We'll talk about why silence in those moments isn't cruelty, it's wisdom. It's a strength. It's love turned inward. It happens more often than we admit. Someone walks out of your life, sometimes carelessly, sometimes cruelly, and they think you'll always be there, that they can come and go as they please. And for a while, maybe they're right. Maybe you waited. You hoped they'd come around. Maybe you forgave them in your heart, even when they never apologized. But then comes the day when something inside you shifts, when you finally stop waiting, when the silence they left behind becomes yours. And wouldn't you know it? That's exactly when they come back. It's a story I've seen play out too many times. A son who ignores his mother for years suddenly calls when he needs help. An ex-partner who walked away now sends long texts full of regret. A friend who vanished without a word now wants to meet for coffee and talk things out. They've realized something. They feel the weight of your absence, and they want back in. But here's what I want to tell you. Just because they regret leaving doesn't mean you owe them a return. Regret is loud. It begs. It pleads. It promises change. But silence, your silence, has its own kind of power. It says, I've healed. It says, I've grown past the point of needing your validation. It says, I don't live in the past anymore. Let me tell you about Norma. She's 69 and lives alone now after ending a long-term relationship that had grown cold and unkind. Her partner had taken her for granted for years, never appreciated the little things, forgot anniversaries, ignored her feelings, and worst of all, he assumed she would never leave. But one day, she did. No argument, no drama. She just packed her things, walked out, and never looked back. At first, he didn't believe she was serious. Then came the texts, then the calls, then the messages came through friends. He begged, he cried, he even showed up at her church one morning. But Norma had already found something he couldn't give her: peace. Her silence wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about being cold. It was about honoring the years she had spent trying, years she could never get back. It was about finally choosing herself. You see, when someone regrets losing you, that's their journey. But that doesn't mean you're required to meet them halfway. In fact, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stay silent, even when they finally want to talk. Because silence says what explanations never can. It tells them that what they had with you was rare, that they wasted something precious, that the door they once walked through is no longer open. And if that sounds harsh, consider this. You gave them time. You gave them chances. You gave them access. And they used it poorly. Now, karma is teaching them the lesson your words never could. You've probably heard the quote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That includes emotional mastery. That includes learning when not to go back, even if the apology is sincere, even if the guilt is heavy. Because peace isn't something you negotiate. It's something you protect. Now let's talk about something just as important, the art of not chasing. Not everyone who disappears from your life is meant to return. And not every relationship is worth resurrecting just because someone finally woke up. When you stop reaching out, when you stop reminding people of your worth, something magical happens. You see who makes the effort, who calls, who shows up, who cares without needing a push. There was a man named Henry, 73 years old. He had spent years sending birthday cards to his nephews, checking in on his neighbors, offering rides to doctor's appointments, hosting holidays when no one else would. But as the years passed, the phone stopped ringing. The thank yous stopped coming. The invitations dried up. He was hurt, deeply. But instead of getting bitter, he got quiet. He stopped chasing. And what followed was telling. One of his nieces drove across town just to check on him. An old friend dropped by with a pie. Not many came. But the ones who did, they came with sincerity. No guilt. No pretense. Just love. And that's the lesson. Your silence is not a wall, it's a filter. It clears out the noise and lets the real ones in. Because in old age, the circle gets smaller. And that's a gift. You don't need quantity. You need quality. A handful of people who truly see you, who care without reminders. That's enough. More than enough. So when someone comes back full of regret, when they finally say they miss you, think carefully. Is it the memory of you they miss, or the comfort of knowing you'd always be there? If someone didn't see your value while you were present, your absence is the only thing that might teach them. And your silence? That's the classroom. Let's be clear. Silence is not punishment. It's protection. It's boundaries. It's emotional clarity. It says, I am not angry. I am just done. Because you don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to argue to be right. You don't need to go backward just because someone finally caught up. Your silence is enough. And now we're going to talk about the biggest shift of all, what it means to walk away from chaos, to release the need to control outcomes, and to let karma, slow, steady, silent karma, handle everything you once thought you had to fix yourself. There's something incredibly freeing that happens when you stop needing to have the last word. When you stop needing to be understood or vindicated or right in the eyes of people who were never really listening in the first place. And in old age, that freedom becomes sacred. You've carried enough burdens. You've wasted enough energy trying to fix what never wanted to be fixed. You've argued with people who just wanted to win, not understand. And somewhere along the way, you learned it's not your job anymore. You stopped chasing peace in chaotic places. You stop entering battles that don't deserve your presence. And instead, you sit back. You breathe. You let the dust settle without lifting a single finger. And it's in that stillness, in that beautiful, powerful silence, that karma does what karma does best. Let's talk about the people who feed on conflict. You know the type. They push your buttons, poke at old wounds, say things designed to trigger you, not because they're brave, but because your reaction gives them power. And if you flinch, if you rise to the bait, they feel in control. That's the goal. Not honesty, not truth, just control. But when you don't respond, when you look them in the eye and say absolutely nothing, that's when they start to unravel. I remember a man named Otis. He was 74 and still sharp as a tack. He had a neighbor, a loud, unpleasant man who always seemed to find fault with something. Whether it was the way Otis trimmed his hedges or where he parked his car, there was always a complaint. And for a long time, Otis tried to reason with him, tried to stay friendly, but it never worked. The man didn't want peace, he wanted control. So Otis changed his approach. He stopped explaining. When the man barked complaints, Otis would nod politely and say nothing. Just walked away. No sarcasm. No side comments. Just complete, calm detachment. And over time, the complaint stopped. Not because the man got nicer, but because Otis stopped feeding the fire. Sometimes, silence is what starves the chaos. Because not every situation requires a defense. Not every insult requires a rebuttal. And not every opponent deserves your energy. The strongest person in the room isn't the one who shouts the loudest. It's the one everyone tries to provoke, and no one can move. Because their silence isn't empty. It's armor. That kind of silence doesn't come easily. It's built through decades of experience. Through heartbreaks. Through lessons learned the hard way. And when you finally step into it fully, without apology, you realize how peaceful life can be when you stop trying to manage everyone else's emotions. Let them be loud. Let them twist the truth. Let them think they've won. You sit still. You hold your frame. And you let karma write the ending. And here's the thing about karma. It doesn't show up on your schedule. It's not always fast. It doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes, karma shows up as a quiet moment of realization in someone else's life. They remember the kindness you gave, the chances you offered, the patience you showed, and it hits them. You weren't the villain. You were the light they didn't recognize. But by then, you're gone. Not angry, not bitter, just gone. Let me tell you about Grace. She was 70 when her daughter, after years of emotional manipulation, cut off contact during an argument that never needed to go that far. Grace had been a steady presence in her daughter's life. Babysat the grandkids, paid for car repairs, supported her emotionally through every hard moment. But one day, her daughter exploded, called her controlling, and slammed the door. For months, Grace heard nothing. No calls. No holidays. Just silence. And the pain of that silence was real. But Grace didn't beg. She didn't send messages demanding respect. She didn't call relatives to set the record straight. She waited, in peace, in prayer, in quiet. A year later, her daughter came back, teary, remorseful, full of regret. And Grace? She didn't open the door wide again. She welcomed the conversation, but she did it on her terms. Slowly, with caution. Her silence had drawn a boundary that couldn't be erased. Because when you've been hurt, silence is how you protect what's left of yourself. It's how you heal. It's how you let people know, I may forgive you, but I won't hand you the same access again. That's not bitterness. That's self-respect. In a world full of noise, constant news, constant opinions, constant drama, choosing silence is radical. It's powerful. And it's often the only thing that keeps your peace intact. So here's what I hope you carry from this message today. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to argue to be right. You don't need to perform to prove your worth. Let them lie. Let them betray. Let them provoke. Let them regret. But you stay quiet. You stay grounded. And you let karma, slow, steady, undeniable karma, handle the rest. Because at this age, you've already earned the right not to explain yourself. You've lived long enough to know that time reveals the truth, that silence protects your dignity, and that karma, no matter how long it takes, always keeps its promise. So walk away without noise. Hold your peace like the treasure it is. And when the world wants a reaction from you, give it the one thing it never expects. Nothing at all. Because that nothing, that silence is actually everything.